Welcome to my first impressions of Elite Dangerous Odyssey, the review. I can assure you, I'm not one of those content creators that will rush to make a first impressions video for those juicy YouTube views. It's far more important to me that I make sure I experience everything, so I can pass all that information on to you without making assumptions. Ultimately, this means doing everything I can, including every mission type, figuring out all the puzzles and mini puzzles inside these missions, figuring out how to farm all the mats effectively. I'm basically doing everything I possibly can to experiment outside the box when I test an alpha. This way, you can go into the game with open eyes if you choose to. From a first impressions point of view, let's start off talking about the good. What were the things I was blown away by when I first played Odyssey? First and foremost, I was absolutely blown away by the graphical upgrades to Elite Dangerous within Odyssey. The more realistic a dev can make games for me, the better. It really immerses me into the experience, bringing me even closer to the feeling of actually being there. I absolutely love the space views from planets, moons, outposts, or even inside the daggone taxi. When we first saw the Starport Tour, I got really excited. Then Odyssey released and I was able to experience that for myself on every single station. I very much like how the devs design these common areas to have subtle differences, but they all run along similar themes. This makes it so you can navigate through them with ease. With the way starports are arranged, you can get in, conduct your business, then get out relatively quickly, and I like that. Getting out of the elevator and then running up to the taxi for the first time was basically amazing. I was blown away by the size difference. I seriously cannot wait to be able to see what my cutter or Corvette looks like inside the hangar. I seriously want to see myself be smaller than a bolt that holds the landing gear together, thank you very much. Sadly, most of the cool things end with that when it comes to the taxi, other than being able to use it as some kind of extra personal storage device. I'll cover that when we get to the ugly. When I got out of my taxi to try to complete my first mission, I was literally clubbed over the head by how glorious the FPS experience really is. I actually made a video cracking jokes on the devs about their combat reveal. I can assure you the joke was on me for making that video. How your commander's movement responds to your inputs on these surface missions can only be described as smooth as silk, and that's a massive understatement. Adding the ability to use your rocket pack takes exploring or being a space ninja to new levels of glory when in combat. I have had some hairy real moments with other games on occasion, but Odyssey so far takes the FPS movement and immersion cake prize hands down in my opinion. Another neat thing I love about these missions at Outposts is a lot of them have puzzles or even puzzles inside of puzzles in order to beat the mission. You literally have no hope of beating the mission if you don't know how to solve the puzzles using the tools given to us in the Maverick suit. I have more fun fooling around being a space ninja trying to solve the puzzles more than the actual payouts for the mission rewards. That is so anti-me, you have no idea. I'm usually all about getting that space cheddar as quickly as possible. Job well done, devs, on making the missions challenging. Some might say too challenging, but that's for another video. NPC AI, for the most part, is glorious. It's a mixed bag, as it has some really good points as well as exploitable ugly disadvantages. Let's talk about the good first. AI is pretty darn win for the most part. They path well. Their walking animations are pretty spot on. They can hear you if you're blundering around and will stare at you during your clumsy non-ninja moments. If they don't see you, you can sneak around using objects to hide behind and they will never see you. When in combat, they don't hit every single shot like aimbots, although you will get smoked very quickly if you forget to have your shields up and are caught off guard. Overall, you can expect the AI to handle themselves very well under most circumstances. Never fear, Later we will go into their ugly disadvantages as well as their one uber advantage once triggered. Speaking of weapons in combat, I really love the concept of having to take my opponent's shields down, then using kinetic weapons to take them out. This reminds me of the good old days of Op and Deagle and Counter-Strike. I was always swapping weapons around from primary to secondary. In Odyssey, I love how you must split your weapons. I'm not just running around with some BFG and only using that. This also enhances team gameplay when you have members specifically assigned for taking shields down and others to get those juicy kills. Taking down NPCs becomes a thing of beauty when done right. This requires coordination when grouping with friends, and in solo, it means you must plan out your attack before you even fire your first shot. As for our weapon loadouts, I will cover one thing I wish we could change in the bad. Before I even chose my first mission, I spent time looking them all over. I read their descriptions while hearing all my friends that were dying like lemmings off a cliff. I saw that just from the brief descriptions the missions gave, there was a clear progression that was meant to be taken to minimize commander deaths. Those simple explanations of what to expect from new Odyssey missions were gold to me and why I liked them. It is why I showed you the transportation support and slightly dangerous Robin Hood Space Ninja method in my best start for Odyssey. I wanted to save you from those long taxi rides and unwanted deaths while trying to progress. First, it's about getting the things, then kicking the space butts. However, missions also have their bad side, which you can guarantee I will cover later. To sum up the good, it's basically so good it blew my expectations away. Seeing as how we just got in the first week of Odyssey Alpha, I can't wait to be further blown away by more additions in our future. Sometimes in an alpha, there are exploits as well as bad things or bugs. The reason why this is something I feel is good has been how swift FDev has been to patch them so far. Load screen times on booking shuttle rides was mostly fixed. Being able to buy consumables for free, then sell them back to the bartender was fixed. Other things, including abandoning missions and earning 100k a pop, were patched. Swift fixes and quality of life changes happening regularly is a very good thing for us testers. This allows us to test in an environment closer to what we need to experience at Odyssey's release. I always love rapid fixes that are not just harp seal clubbings, so thank you. Sadly, a lot of good things come with some bad in Odyssey. Bad things I can deal with as long as the greater good outshines the bad. Thankfully, this list is much shorter now due to patches. Now this first bad comes from the standpoint of trying to play with tons of friends. We all get into a team and then immediately go to the mission boards to find missions to do together. We quickly see there are no wing missions that one of us can just grab then share with our buddies. Instead, it was a huge cluster of trying to find the same location so we could all go there having a mission to complete. This was a much more confusing process to something new in Odyssey that frankly didn't need to happen if there were wing missions we could share. Having to find the same missions usually revolves around being at the same station at the same time. If you try to find the same missions at another station, well, it's kind of like a crapshoot. The next thing about missions that almost got the ugly status on my first impressions was not having a distance locator on the mission, especially when you are in a trinary star system where some missions can be 150k plus light seconds away from our current location. This just turned into us taking tons of missions and just discarding the other ones that were too far away, as it was just simpler than looking up the location moon by moon. Thankfully, the community pulled through with a spreadsheet, so now it's just a bad instead of the ugly. Now this one might actually be a little unfair as it pulls from my experience watching the Starport video, but I definitely wasn't thrilled with the bad fade to black animation when you get in or out of your ship. I don't need to fully run around in my ship yet, but a short animation similar to what the SRV has now would have gone a long way with me. Some 2-second short animation of me reaching for some ladder or climbing on a ramp or anything before a straight fade to black, for me, that is not the real Neil Armstrong moment I had been waiting for. Granted, I was prepared for a week. However, it didn't soften the blow much on my first fade to black though. I can say as a first impression, a simple fade to black let me down. Do we have beaming technology now? This feels like Star Trek or No Man's Sky to me. Now I can say I rarely experience this, but it is worth mentioning as others have experienced this in masses. NPC or team members can seem to vibrate up and down or shudder around in some instances or in the common places. I experienced this when I was being a space Robin Hood ninja. All the NPCs were shuddering around like watching a flip book or something. All the while, I was experiencing smooth as silk gameplay on my end, while it appeared like everything else was lagging around. Granted, this was my bad as a new player. I definitely won't forget my first impression of flying over 150k light seconds away. I landed at the mission location and started running up the middle. As I ran by a group of boxes, I didn't notice a guard standing there. I guess he yelled at me to stop so he could scan me. I didn't hear him. The next thing I know, I'm getting owned in the back, then I'm dead. When you spend 20 minutes flying to a location to learn a hard lesson, that pill gets harder to swallow knowing you couldn't do anything for those 20 minutes besides twiddle your thumbs in a taxi. What would turn this bad into a good would be getting the scan notification as they warn you to stand still and not after. That way you know you better stop. The "you are getting scanned" notification is very noticeable, believe me. Getting warned by a guard on the other side of some boxes as you run by isn't noticeable with background sounds and music, just FYI. Combat AI has both a bad advantage as well as an ugly exploitable weakness. So let's talk about their bad advantage. This advantage does not take effect until there is an alarm triggered or you are discovered for being a space scumbag by doing criminal activity. As soon as that moment happens, they can see through all walls. They know exactly where you are at all times, so there is no hiding. There is usually one option, which is putting off the inevitable for as long as you can. Then you end up getting space killed. Some of the people on my Discord can take out entire settlements solo, while others just get completely wrecked by the wall hacking AI once they're triggered. Just be aware, before they are triggered, the AI acts very well. Once you trigger them, they see all and know all. They're basically space god. On this next one, it's just one small thing that throws this into the bad category for me as a first impression to an FPS, is not being able to make my laser pistol my primary weapon, while having my bigger AR-50 as the secondary. Let's face it, taking down shields first is a thing. In almost every case, this is your first step in engaging your enemies in combat. I am so bred into pressing 1 for my primary that I find myself pulling out my AR and not my laser pistol a lot when I engage. Granted, it's now getting better days later, but still, it would be nice to be able to assign a pistol as a primary weapon in the Maverick suit. Now it's time to pull out the Harp Seal Club so we can talk about the ugly inside of Odyssey. I generally don't like to complain too hard in early alpha, but I feel like these things could have been taken into account before the alpha testing phase. The ugliest thing to me so far is realizing just how much time I have spent sitting inside a taxi while testing this alpha. When choosing this star system, the team had to have known just how ruthless a 150k light second voyage is in Super Cruise Assist, when you basically can do nothing inside the taxi. Sure, you can look at your loot on a panel, you can set a macro for third-person camera mode to look at the stars, planets, and moons, but that only goes so far. As a first impression of things to come, I very much hope they look into something that doesn't involve the same boring gameplay a fleet carrier owner had to suffer through in Horizons. I can assure you, nobody wants to play a game where half of the playing time is taken up by cleaning their house or watching Netflix. If anything, implement actual jail gameplay to punish us for being space crooks. Please don't make that punishment for failing a foot mission, a taxi ride over and over again. I want to feel the distance of space, but I kind of don't want to feel the distance of space, if you get me. There has to be a better way. When it comes to ugly AI that can be exploited, Odyssey reminds me of the zombie AI in 7 Days to Die. If they have a path to you, they will find you and they will kill you. If you jump on top of a building that doesn't have roof access, then you are in the perfect place to cheese the entire mission or clear out the entire settlement of guards. This is bad enough, but you can cheese it even more by using roof angles. If the AI sees your head, they will fire for it. If you position yourself just right, they will always fire into the roof while you are busy shooting them in their head. They are not smart enough to get a better angle like the drones can. They are content to stand there and shoot directly into the roof until you kill them, all the while creating a huge pile of bodies. The second you change position where they can get to you, let the AI wall hacking begin, as they will bum rush your location from all directions. I think with some minor tweaks though, this can go from ugly to good. It only gets ugly status just because of how exploitable it can be on some of those tougher missions. Overall, if I take my good impressions and mix them with my bad and ugly experiences, I have to say that I have been addicted to playing Elite Dangerous Odyssey. I can't count how many alphas I have played during my time, and none of them have come even close to my first impressions and great experiences with this DLC. We are in just the first week of alpha testing, so I look forward to many more new first impressions and experiences. I'm ready to take the good with the bad and hopefully as little ugly as possible.